My name is Phoebe Mercer. I'm 28 years old, and I have photographed 11 Easters I was never in. This year, my family didn't even hand me the camera. They took the picture at 10 and told me to come at 11. I found out from the pastel sweaters. Everyone matched. Nobody had mentioned a color. I set my deviled eggs on the counter and smiled, because smiling was my job in that house, the way carving the ham was my dad's. But this year, a stranger's comment under my sister's Instagram post was about to crack my family open like one of those eggs, and the message a retired nurse sent me at midnight. I still keep a copy of it in a locked drawer. What she knew about me, my own mother had spent 28 years burying. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family secrets come to light and quiet women find their voice. Every week we share stories about the moment a woman stops asking for a seat at the table and builds her own. If stories like this one speak to you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. Easter at my parents' house ran on a schedule I was never given. I arrived at 11 with my tray of deviled eggs and found the whole family already posed and finished, lilies on the porch, my mom's good tablecloth ironed flat as a hymn book. My sister Brianna was still holding the photographer's invoice. "You're here. Perfect timing. The light got weird anyway," she said, which was her way of saying the picture was done. I know how this sounds. You're wondering why a grown woman kept showing up. Here's the honest answer. My grandmother Ruth has Parkinson's. I'm the only nurse in the family, and I coordinate every specialist, every prescription, every fall. You don't get to quit people who need your hands, even when they only invite the rest of you at 11. So I did what I always did. I refilled glasses. I cut the ham when my dad's shoulder acted up. I apologized to my aunt for a draft I didn't cause. By 8 that night, I was home in my duplex across town, scrubbing egg yolk off a tray, when Brianna posted the photo. Pastel sweaters, white chairs, the caption, "The whole family, together." I counted heads the way you count pills, out of habit. 17 people. Every cousin twice removed made that photograph. I stared at it longer than I should have, and I was about to close the app when a new comment appeared under the post, from an account with a white lily for a profile picture. 5 o'clock somewhere, some stranger typing in the dark. The comment said, "Where's the girl from the hospital?" I read it twice. My thumb went cold on the screen. I had no idea what it meant, but somehow my body did. I refreshed the page. The comment was gone. I refreshed again, and the whole post was gone. 17 pastel people vanished. I checked the time. From comment to deletion took about 40 seconds. 40 seconds. At 9 on a Sunday night, which meant somebody in that house had been watching that post like a monitor in an ICU. I called my mom, because pretending not to know things is a skill I never mastered. "Sweet of you to call," she said, in the voice she uses on telemarketers. I asked, light as I could, why Brianna took the photo down. There was a pause with furniture in it, a chair scraping somewhere, a door closing. "The lighting was unflattering to your grandmother." My mom has explained away 30 years of things with lighting. I said someone had commented something strange, something about a hospital. The silence that came back was different. It wasn't empty. It was load-bearing. When she finally spoke, her voice had dropped into a register I'd only heard twice in my life, both times at funerals. "Some pictures aren't for everyone, sweetheart." Then she said goodnight and hung up, and I stood in my kitchen holding a dish towel like it was going to explain something. Here's what I knew about my mother, Lorraine Mercer. She kept photo albums organized by year. She ironed sweaters. She had never once in my memory moved fast. People like that don't delete a photograph in 40 seconds. People like that don't move fast unless something is chasing them. I dried the tray. I turned off the light. I told myself it was church lady drama, someone's feud about a casserole. You don't delete a picture that fast unless it touches something buried very deep. And I'd just watched my family reach for a shovel. At 11:47 that night, my phone lit up with a message request from a woman named Carol W. No mutual follows, Profile photo of a garden. I almost deleted it. Then I read it, and the kitchen got very quiet. I was your nurse 20 years ago. Your parents told us you died at birth. I just saw you on Instagram. I have something you need to see. I read it 5 times, standing barefoot on cold linoleum. My first reaction wasn't fear. I'm a hospice nurse. I've been on shift for enough 3 a.m. phone calls that my hands stay steady out of spite. My first reaction was procedure. I checked her profile the way I'd check a chart. Carol Wetzel, Toledo, Ohio, retired RN, pediatrics, St. Bridget's Regional. 41 photos of tomatoes and grandkids going back 9 years. Nobody builds a 9-year garden account to run a scam. One mutual connection. Dr. Patel, a physician I'd worked hospice cases with, a man who doesn't friend strangers. So the person was real, which made the words worse. Your parents told us you died at birth. I sat down on my kitchen floor, which I'd like to say was a choice. Because here's the thing that stranger couldn't have known, the thing that made my skin go tight. I did spend time at St. Bridget's. 5 weeks of it, when I was 8 years old. Bacterial meningitis, a fever that cooked the edges off my memories. Around our church, for years afterward, that's what I was. Not Phoebe who got straight A's, not Phoebe who became a nurse. The girl from the hospital. I'd always thought that chapter of my life was closed. Apparently, someone had just found a page I'd never been allowed to read. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed doing inventory on the year I was 8, holding each memory up to the light like a syringe. 5 weeks at St. Bridget's Regional, up in Toledo, 40 minutes from our town. A tube in my hand. A ceiling tile with a water stain shaped like a rabbit. My mom came during visiting hours, never outside them. Always with her camera bag on her shoulder. And she never took it out. I asked her once to take a picture of me and the rabbit stain because I was 8 and dying to be documented. She looked at me like I'd asked her to shoplift. We don't photograph sickness, Phoebe. At the time, I filed it with her other laws, like no elbows on the table. But lying there at 3 a.m, 20 years later, a different memory surfaced. One the fever had half melted. A night when my temperature spiked. Voices outside my door, low and furious. My mother's voice, and a stranger's, and one word rising out of the murmur again and again like a splinter working its way out of skin. Paperwork. Paperwork. I'd always assumed it was about insurance. Now I got up, turned on every light in the duplex, and pulled out the shoebox of pictures I'd taken from my parents' house when I moved out at 22. Brianna as a newborn. Dozens of photos, hospital bracelet, red-faced, screaming, adored. Me? I went through it twice. The earliest photograph of me that exists shows a toddler already steady on her feet, standing at the edge of a cousin pile in somebody's backyard. 14 months old, maybe more. There is no picture of me as a newborn. There is no picture of my mother pregnant with me. I had never once noticed, and now it was all I could see. Tuesday, I drove to my parents' house while my mom was at her Women's Guild meeting because my grandmother Ruth needed her blood pressure checked and I needed an alibi, and only one of those was on the calendar. Grandma Ruth lives in the converted den, 84 years old, Parkinson's slowly sanding her down. While her cuff inflated, I said I wanted to pull some old photos for her birthday next month, and she waved a trembling hand toward the hall closet like a queen granting lands. The album stood in a row, spines labeled in my mother's handwriting. 1995, 96, 97. Brianna's year, fat with baby pictures, then 1998. My year. I pulled it down and it felt wrong in my hands, too light, like a hollowed book people hide keys in. Inside, the first few pages were normal. New Year's, my dad Walt in a terrible sweater. Then, where spring should have been, ragged edges. Pages torn out at the gutter, glue still holding little triangles of paper, a whole season amputated. Someone hadn't just removed photos. Someone had removed the places where photos go. I stood in that hallway hearing my own pulse, and I carried the album in to Ruth, keeping my voice church soft. "Grandma, look what I found." She reached out and touched the cover. And her face did something I will never forget. It opened, the way faces do at a viewing, grief and tenderness with nowhere to put themselves. She looked straight at me, straight through 28 years, and she said, "June?" I said, "No, Grandma, it's Phoebe." Her hand pulled back like the album was hot. "Phoebe," she repeated, and then, so quietly I nearly missed it. "No, we buried Phoebe." That night I answered Carol Wetzel. I kept it clinical, the way you talk when your hands want to shake. "Was that you who commented on my sister's post?" The reply came fast, like she'd been sitting with the phone in her lap. "Yes." And she was sorry. Sorrier than she could say. Her granddaughter follows Brianna, one of those small-town algorithm coincidences, and the photo had scrolled past while Carol was drinking her evening tea. 17 faces, and then mine, off to the side of none of them, because of course I wasn't in it. She'd seen it before the family staged anything. In an older post from Christmas, me in the background carrying a pie. She said my face stopped her cold. Said I was the image of somebody she knew a long time ago, a girl she'd thought about for 28 years. She'd typed the comment in a rush of anger she couldn't fully explain to herself. "Where's the girl from the hospital?" And within a minute, she was blocked. Blocked, I thought. Not ignored, not answered. Blocked, in under a minute, by people who claim they've never heard of her. I asked what she meant about my parents, about me dying. She wouldn't put it in writing. "Some things you say to a person's face," she wrote, "so you can hold their hand when you do." It's the kind of sentence nurses write, and it scared me more than anything else that week. We agreed on a coffee shop in Toledo Saturday, 10 o'clock, neutral ground. Then she sent one more message and I stopped breathing for a second. "Bring your birth certificate, honey, then I'll show you the other one." Grandma Ruth's birthday dinner fell on the Thursday before, and I went, because her cardiologist notes were in my bag, and because I wanted to look at my family with new eyes. It's a strange thing, seeing your whole life relit. The table sat 12, and my place card, my mother does place cards, put me at the corner by the kitchen door, the seat that gets bumped every time someone brings a dish. It had always been my seat. I'd always told myself it was practical, since I was up and down helping anyway. Now I watched the geography of it. Brianna at the center, under the good chandelier. Me in the doorway, half in shadow, easy to crop. When the cake came out, Brianna raised her phone for a selfie with Grandma, and I leaned in, on reflex, the way you lean toward warmth. My sister tilted the phone away, a small maneuver, smooth as a signature. "Careful, Fee. Some pictures aren't for everyone, remember?" She said it in a party voice, and the table laughed, and my mother smiled into her wine glass, and the laugh moved around the table like a plate everyone had to take some of. My dad Walt didn't laugh. He looked down at his ham as if it had asked him a hard question. That was the moment I stopped explaining things away, right there between the cake and the coffee. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't lighting. It was policy. Whatever the reason, keeping me out of the frame was a rule in this family, old and understood, obeyed by everyone but me. I smiled. My job, remember? And inside I felt something quietly change shifts. The hurt clocked out. Something colder clocked in. Something with better handwriting. Carol Wetzel turned out to be a small woman with gardener's hands and the eyes nurses get, the ones that have watched too many monitors. She was already seated when I walked into the coffee shop, a shoebox on the table in front of her like a casserole nobody wanted. She stood, took my face in both hands without asking, and studied me. "Lord," she said, "you even stand like her." We sat. She didn't open the box. She started in 2006 instead, the year I was 8, the year of the meningitis. She'd been on the pediatric floor at St. Bridget's for years by then. She remembered me, Bed 12. The girl who asked the staff more questions than the residents did. The girl whose fever wouldn't break for 9 days. And she remembered the afternoon the records office called the floor, flustered, because intake had tried to link my admission to my birth record. Same hospital, same name, standard procedure. And the system had thrown it back. The birth record for Phoebe Ann Mercer at St. Bridget's Regional was closed. Closed, as in finished. Closed, as in deceased. April 12, 1998. A clerk assumed a clerical error. A supervisor asked my parents, quietly in the family lounge, to clear up the discrepancy. Carol was there with a med cart, close enough to see it happen. I asked what my parents said. Carol turned her coffee cup a slow half circle, a woman deciding how much medicine to give at once. Your father studied the floor tile like it owed him money. Your mother said their first daughter died at birth, and that you were a relative's child they'd taken in. And honey, I've told a lot of families a lot of hard things. I know, shocked. Your mother didn't look shocked. She looked caught. Then she opened the shoebox. Inside were 2 photocopies, soft at the folds from 20 years of being taken out and put back. She laid the first in front of me the way you set down a sleeping child. A fetal death record. St. Bridget's Regional. Baby girl Mercer. April 12, 1998. Mother, Lorraine Mercer. Father, Walter Mercer. Under disposition, in typewriter font. Buried, St. Bridget's Parish Cemetery, Infant Row. I did the math I didn't want to do. April of 98 sat 3 weeks shy of the birthday I'd celebrated my whole life. The hospital had you dead, Carol said gently, and there you were, in bed 12, asking my student nurses about dosage math. The second photocopy was a page from the maternity ward log, same spring. A 17-year-old patient, initials JC, admitted March 28, 98. Delivered a healthy girl, 6 pounds 1 ounce, discharged alone on the 31st. And in the column for the infant, a phrase that rearranged my skeleton, discharged to family. After the day in the lounge, I went looking, Carol said. I wasn't supposed to. I made these copies the week I retired because a person shouldn't carry a thing like this in her memory alone. Your parents told us the baby named Phoebe died at birth, so for 20 years I have wondered, every Easter, whatever happened to JC's little girl. My coffee had gone cold without my touching it. I made myself look at the log page again, at the signature scrawled in the box marked Released To. The handwriting was shaky now on birthday cards, but I'd have known it anywhere. Ruth. I gave myself 3 days to become a person who could sit across from my mother, and then I went over on Wednesday with a casserole and a plan. I didn't bring the photocopies. You don't open with your whole hand. I've watched enough families negotiate at deathbeds to know that. I waited until we were drying dishes, her hands busy, her guard resting, and I said I'd been going through the albums for Grandma's scrapbook. The 98 one has pages torn out, and Grandma keeps calling me June. Who's June? The dish towel in her hand stopped. 2 seconds. I counted them the way you count a pulse. When she moved again, it was all administration. Cupboard open, glass away, cupboard shut. June was your grandmother's mistake, not mine, she said, each word placed like a place card. She left before you could walk. Some people are a lesson, Phoebe, not a relative. I asked what the lesson was. My mother folded the towel in thirds, hung it straight, and looked at me with the level patience she saves for people who are about to disappoint her. That grief is a door you close. We replace what we lose in this family. We don't drown in it. She patted my arm, patted it, like a form being stamped, and offered me decaf. I drove home with my hands very quiet on the wheel. Past 11, my phone buzzed. My mother, who texts like she's paying by the letter, had sent a full sentence. Sunday dinner, 1 o'clock. Family only. I read it in the dark of my kitchen. Family only. For the first time in my life, I genuinely did not know whether I was inside that word or out of it. Sunday dinner was a tribunal with a pot roast. My mother waited until the plates were full. Witnesses seated, exits covered. And then she said, pleasantly, So, you've been driving to Toledo. Small towns don't need surveillance. They have parking lots. I set down my fork and said yes. I'd met a retired nurse from St. Bridget's. I watched the table go still, watched Brianna's eyes flick to Mom like a passenger checking the driver. And then my mother did the thing I never saw coming. She didn't deny anything. She dabbed her mouth, laid the napkin down, and said, "Yes, you're adopted. Kinship adoption. You were family blood, and we raised you when no one else would. We saved you. Is that what you drove 40 minutes to hear?" The word adopted landed on that table like a serving dish nobody asked for. And here is the terrible cleverness of my mother. A half-truth, offered whole, so the matter looks closed. Brianna actually exhaled. Finally, like a secret was a splinter now out. My dad Walt said quietly, "Let it rest, Fee." And that more than anything, was the wound of the night. My father, the man who taught me to check my oil and my smoke alarms, had known the shape of this thing my entire life, and had chosen, every single day, the peace of the house over me. I looked around at all of them and did the math they didn't know I had. If it was legal, why the torn pages? If it was kinship, why does a hospital record say your daughter Phoebe died? If you saved me, I kept my voice level, a nurse's voice. Who exactly did you save me from? My mother smiled and passed the potatoes. Eat, she said. It's getting cold. Case closed, said her face. Her face had no idea. The fetal death record listed a disposition, and the disposition listed a place, and that is how I came to be standing in St. Bridget's Parish Cemetery on a gray Tuesday in April, in the infant row, where the stones are small and close together like baby teeth. Section C, row 4. I walked it slowly, reading names that never got used, dates where both numbers match. And then I stopped, because there it was, granite, no bigger than a bread loaf, and it said, Phoebe Ann Mercer, April 12th, 1998. Our angel. My name, on a grave, over a date that isn't my birthday, but lives 2 weeks from it. I stood there while the wind moved the cedar trees, and I want to be honest about what I felt, because it wasn't horror. It was recognition. Like walking past a mirror in a dark hallway and realizing the reflection had been walking there your whole life. There were no flowers, not even old ones. But the grass around the stone was edged, trimmed, tended. The plot was paid for and cared for and never, ever visited. Somebody in my family had been keeping a dead child neat for 28 years while cropping a living one out of photographs. I knelt and put my hand flat on the carved letters of my own name, and the granite was colder than any patient I have ever pronounced. A grave you maintain, but can't visit. A daughter you keep, but can't look at. Both of us, tended and unloved. I stayed until my knees went numb, and when I stood up, I was somebody slightly different, and there was no walking it back. Because the question was no longer, who am I? The log page and the grave had answered that between them. The question now was what I had been brought home to be. A daughter? Or a replacement part? I need to pause here, just for a breath. If you've ever stood in a place that rewrote everything you knew about yourself, tell me in the comments how you kept breathing. I read everyone. And if you're new here, subscribe, because you'll want to hear the rest. What my grandmother confessed next, I'm still not over. Home again, I laid my birth certificate on the kitchen table next to Carol's photocopies, 3 documents that could not all be true. My birth certificate says May 2nd, 1998. It's a delayed registration. I'd never thought about that phrase before, but it's printed right there, filed the following year, in a county 2 over from ours, listing Lorraine and Walter Mercer as my parents. Clean, legal-looking, boring. It's the paper my whole life is built on, my driver's license, my nursing license, my passport. And it is fiction. The maternity log says JC's baby girl arrived March 28th. The grave says the real Phoebe Ann Mercer died April 12th, and my official birthday, the one with cake and candles every single year, floats there in May, attached to nothing. Until I called the county and asked a records clerk what happens administratively around a fetal death. Certificates get filed. Files get closed. The clerk, bless her chatty heart, even told me the closure date on the Mercer file, because I asked nicely and sounded like a nurse. May 2nd, 1998. I thanked her and hung up, and sat very still. My birthday, the day my mother chose for me, the day of balloons and my name in frosting, is the day the paperwork on her dead daughter was finished. Every year my family gathers to celebrate the closing of a file. I thought about 27 cakes. I thought about my mother lighting candles on that date, year after year, with a straight back and a steady hand. And I understood something about her for the first time. She had built a calendar where her grief and my existence were the same appointment, and she had never missed it once. You can call that madness. Standing in my kitchen, I called it what nurses call it, a wound, dressed wrong for 30 years. Grandma Ruth's Thursday appointment came around, blood pressure and pill organizer, the two of us alone in the converted den that smells of lavender and old paper. I'd decided not to ask. Then she watched me count out her levodopa and said, "Apropos of nothing, you hold your hands like her too." I kept my eyes on the pills. "Like June?" I said, and Ruth nodded, easy as weather, the disease having worn her gatekeeping thin. So I asked, softly, who June was. "My youngest," she said. "Lorraine, then Christine, then June, my caboose, prettiest of the three and didn't know it." I asked what happened to her, and my grandmother told me, in the flat voice of a woman reading a grocery list, a story she had clearly told herself so many times it had gone smooth. June got in trouble at 17. Trouble, that generation's whole word for it, with a boy from the plant. They sent her up to Toledo, to an aunt, to wait it out where the congregation couldn't count months on their fingers. "And Lorraine," Ruth said. "Lorraine lost hers on a Tuesday. June had hers on a Saturday. God evens things out." She said it the way you'd say the casserole freezes well. I sat there with a pill in my palm, hearing my own blood. That was the arithmetic of my life. One baby out, one baby in, a ledger balanced in 2 weeks flat, and everyone at church none the wiser. I managed to ask what happened to June after. Ruth's face flickered then, the first static in the broadcast, and she looked toward the window. "June wouldn't sign quietly," she said. "So we made her." I waited, but the window had her now, and whatever else my grandmother knew, she'd gone somewhere I couldn't follow to know it. Finding a woman who left in 1998 is slow work when she isn't on a single social platform, which told me something all by itself. You have to work at that kind of invisible. June Callahan had kept her maiden name. A retired union rep from the Toledo plant remembered her from the packing line, said she was quality control for 20 years, sharp as tin. The address he had for her was a little brick house that a young couple answered. Sorry, they'd bought it 3 months back. From the owner herself. She was sick, the wife said, lowering her voice on the word the way people do. She told us she was going home. Home. I drove back to Millbrook with that word in the car like a passenger. Meanwhile, my family had begun, quietly, to disassemble me. It came in small administrative cuts, my mother's native language. A voicemail from Grandma Ruth's cardiologist saying future scheduling would go through Brianna now, per the family's request. The key to the storage barn, where the albums lived, no longer fit, because the lock was new and nobody mentioned it. And on Thursday, my phone did the small, silent thing phones do now instead of doors slamming. Phoebe Mercer was removed from the conversation. 11 years of family group chat, gone with a tap. I sat with that, longer than I'll admit. Then Friday afternoon, at work, my charge nurse flagged me down between rooms with an intake sheet in her hand and a strange look on her face. "Fee, new admission this afternoon, coming into room 7. Callahan, June, 45. She hesitated, the way you do before handing someone a live wire. Her emergency contact line, she wrote your name. I have walked into a few thousand patient rooms in my career. I have never once stood outside a door and had to teach myself how. Room 7, Riverview Hospice, 4 in the afternoon, sun coming through the blinds in stripes. The woman in the bed was thin, the way the disease makes people thin. Pancreatic. I'd read the chart with my hands shaking. Stage 4. But her eyes, when they found me, were my eyes. Not like mine. Mine. My colleague Dana actually stopped in the hallway behind me and looked between us twice. June Callahan studied my face for a long, unhurried moment, the way you'd study a photograph you'd been promised for years, and then she smiled and said, "You have his hands, your father's. He could fix anything with those hands except his own nerve." I sat down beside the bed before my knees could vote on it. Up close she smelled of hospital soap and, underneath it, cedar. "You wrote my name," I said stupidly, "on your intake." "I wrote your name," she agreed, "on everything they'd let me." She'd chosen Riverview on purpose, the only hospice in the county she swore she'd never come back to. She'd come back to it to die, because dying close to me beat living far away. She had a newspaper clipping in her nightstand, soft as cloth from handling, my nursing school graduation, class list, my name with a little pencil star beside it. She'd been to the pinning ceremony, she said. Last row, hat on, gone before the lights came up. 28 years, from a distance. And then she said the thing that broke me in a brand new place. "I always figured you knew about me, sweetheart. Knew, and couldn't want me." I'd made my peace with that. She'd been waiting for a knock that never came, while I'd been standing in photographs I was never in. Over the next days, in the pieces her strength allowed, June gave me 1998 from the inside. 17 years old, in trouble with Eddie Kowalski from the plant, a boy with good hands and no spine who enlisted the week the test came back. Her mother drove her to Toledo before she showed, to Aunt Vera's, a house with plastic on the furniture and a chore list like a penance. The story the family sent home was a semester with cousins. The word they used was handled, June said. I was 17 and handled. She went into labor on a Saturday, 30 hours. And when it was over and I was clean and loud and alive on her chest, her mother and her oldest sister came into the room with a folder. Consent forms. She refused. "I want you to know that," she said, gripping my wrist with what she had. She refused. First with words, then just by not lifting the pen. So they waited. 30 hours of labor, no sleep. 17 years old, a girl raised her whole life to obey those two particular faces. Ruth held the clipboard. Lorraine held the baby. "Nobody forged anything," June said. "They didn't have to. They just outlasted me." 3 days later she was discharged alone, and the discharge line said to family, and the family it meant was not her. I asked why she never told anyone. She laughed, one dry note, and looked at the ceiling. Told them what? In that town? In that church? A girl in trouble accusing her own mother? Then she rolled her head on the pillow and looked at me, and her voice went gentle in a way I recognized from my own best shifts. "Don't spend it all being angry at Lorraine, sweetheart. They never let her cry for the baby she lost. Not one single day. And a person who isn't allowed to grieve turns to stone. I got the life sentence. She got the statue." My dad showed up at Riverview on a Tuesday, unannounced, holding his cap in both hands like a man at a door he wasn't sure would open. He didn't come to see June. He stood in the hallway, out of view of room 7, and he told me his piece there, quietly, between a supply cart and a watercolor of a lighthouse. In April of '98 he'd buried a daughter on a Thursday. "Your mother wanted to name her Phoebe from the first test," he said. "So Phoebe is who we buried." And on the Friday, one single day later, he came home from the plant and the nursery was empty. Crib broken down, wallpaper borders scraped, every onesie and rattle and hope boxed and gone to the church donation bin. Ruth had done it while they were at work. Done it as a kindness. Her kind of kindness. He found Lorraine on the nursery floor, howling into the carpet where the crib used to stand, and he found Ruth in the kitchen doorway with her arms folded, and he heard his mother-in-law say the sentence that ran the rest of all their lives, "You don't cry over what you can replace." 6 weeks later, June came home for a visit with a bundle, and left without it. "I want you to understand," my father said, and his voice came apart on the middle word. "Your mother was somebody else before," she sang. I watched her turn to stone right in front of me, and I told myself that keeping the peace was a kind of love. I was 40 years wrong, Fee. He looked at me then, first time in weeks. "You were never the wrong thing in that house. You were the proof of it." He put his cap on and left before I could decide which of us he'd come to forgive. There was one question I'd been circling for days, the way you circle a dressing you're afraid to lift. Why didn't you ever come back for me? June didn't answer with words. Not at first. She had me open the bottom drawer of her nightstand, and inside, folded in tissue like something holy, was a quilt. Small squares, careful borders, 27 finished rows and a 28th row hanging half done with the needle still parked in it. The colors changed as the rows climbed, lavender to yellow to a stubborn ocean blue, like years learning to hope. I didn't understand yet what the rows were, and she didn't tell me then. What she told me was this: she did come back. Once. The fall I was 8, when word crawled through the family grapevine that Lorraine's girl was in St. Bridget's with meningitis and it was bad. June left her shift, drove straight there in her work shirt, took the elevator up to pediatrics, and demanded to see the child. She got as far as the hallway outside my room. There was shouting, she said. I did some of it. Paperwork. The stranger's voice. The splinter word in my oldest fever memory. That was her. That was my mother's voice and her sister's, on the far side of a door, while I burned. Lorraine ended it with one sentence, June said. She didn't repeat it right away. I waited. My mother had leaned in close, so the nurses couldn't hear, and said, "She died with you the day you signed." June drove back to Toledo that night and never tried again. "But I sang to you first," she said, "through the crack in the door, while your monitor beeped. Some hymn, I don't remember which." I did. I'd carried that voice 20 years, filed under Fever Dream. It had a face now. For 11 days, I had a mother, and I knew it while it was happening, which is the only mercy in this story, and I intend to count it. I traded shifts, so my rounds ended at room 7. I brushed her hair, what the treatments had left of it, and she critiqued my technique like a foreman. "You pull like you're starting a mower, sweetheart." We looked through the shoe-sized life she'd brought. Photos of her little brick house, her packing line crew at somebody's retirement. A picture of Eddie Kowalski in uniform, young and doomed and grinning. She made me laugh, which I hadn't expected. Dying people are often funnier than the living. They've quit paying certain bills. When I told her about the deviled eggs and the 11 o'clock invitation, she was quiet a moment and then said, "Well, their loss is measurable at least. Those sound like excellent eggs." And she taught me to sew. Whip stitch, on a scrap square, my nurse's fingers clumsy as a first year with a suture kit while she supervised from the pillows. 28 years old, I said, and my mother's first gift to me is homework. First gift was the hands, she said. Homework's the second. I stitched a crooked row and she pronounced it structurally sound and morally embarrassing, and I laughed at a bedside where I'm trained not to. Then Friday, Dr. Osi adjusted her chart, and I read it before he could translate it for me because I read that dialect for a living. Days, not weeks. June watched me absorb it with those eyes that were mine, and being who she was, she comforted me. "Don't look like that," she said. "I got the ending with you in it. That's the good one." Somewhere across town, my family was planning Easter. Here is what I'd forgotten while I was learning whip stitch. Carol's comment had been seen. Screenshotted, the way everything is. It resurfaced in the church women's Facebook group, wedged between a bake sale and a prayer request, and by that Sunday, a woman at the laundromat had asked my mother, sweet as sugar-free pie, what hospital the comment meant, And was everything all right? And wasn't it funny how Phoebe was never in the pictures? My mother said everything was wonderful. Brianna lost 40 followers and one sponsored post with the local realty office, which in her economy was a house fire. And the Mercers did what the Mercers do. They scheduled a photograph. I learned this in the Riverview parking lot on Monday, when my mother's sedan pulled in at the far end, clean as a courtroom. She did not come inside. She did not ask about the woman in room 7, her own sister, dying 80 feet from where she'd parked. She stood beside her car in her good coat and let me come to her, and she said, without preamble, "Easter is in 2 weeks. You'll be in the photograph this year." I waited for more. There wasn't more. No apology, no question, not even a lie. Just a slot. Opening. Front row probably, where everyone can see you. 28 years I had waited to be asked into that frame. I'd rehearsed versions of it in the shower, at stoplights. The year they'd want me, the sweater I'd wear. Now here it was, handed over in a parking lot like a work schedule, and I finally understood what it weighed. Nothing. It was never a door. It was scenery. "I'll check my shifts," I said. My mother looked at me the way you look at weather that might turn. "Do," she said, and drove off. The photograph I'd begged for my whole life, issued to me, at last, like a prop. Let me ask you something honestly. If the thing you begged for your whole life finally arrives, but only as a prop in someone else's performance, do you still take it? Tell me in the comments, because I read them all. Easter morning, I had to answer that question for real, with a dying woman holding my hand. Easter morning arrived with a dress on my doorknob. My mother had dropped it at the duplex early that morning while I slept. Pale yellow, tissue paper, a little card that said simply, 10 o'clock sharp. It was exactly my size. I stood in my bathroom holding it and understood that this was the closest thing to tenderness the operation would include. She knew my measurements by heart, my coffee order, my shoe size. Knowing is not loving. Inventory is not love. I put the dress on anyway because part of me was still 8 years old and wanted the picture, and I looked in the mirror and practiced the smile, the one I'd been doing at that table my whole life, and my own face looked back at me like a stranger doing an impression. That's when the phone rang. Riverview. Dana's voice. Careful. The voice we're trained to use. June had slipped in the night. Unresponsive intervals now. Breathing changed. Hours, Fee. Maybe less. You know how this goes. I did know. I know that slope better than I know any road in this county. I stood there in the yellow dress with my heart doing arithmetic, and the phone buzzed again in my hand. Brianna. Group energy, even in text. Photographer at 10. Don't be late. Mom says front row for you. This photo fixes everything. This photo fixes everything. There it was. The family theology. Complete in one line. The frame heals what the frame excludes, say cheese. 2 roads. 1 morning. A photograph where I would finally exist. And a room where I already did. I picked up my keys. And because 28 years of training doesn't die quietly, I want to be honest with you about what I did next. I got in the car, and I drove toward my parents' house. The backyard had been art-directed, rented white chairs in rows, a garland on the fence, Easter lilies in florist buckets still wearing their price stickers, and a photographer fussing with a reflector while my family arranged itself by height and importance. My mother saw me and something crossed her face that I had never once seen there in my adult life. Relief. She crossed the lawn, took my elbow, and steered me toward the center of the arrangement. "Front row," she said, "where everyone can see you." Where everyone can see you. The exact coordinates of my exile, reversed and reissued as a favor, and the church ladies would scroll past next week and see a whole family, together. And the woman at the laundromat would feel silly, and the comment would die the way comments do. I stood where she put me. Brianna smoothed my collar like a set dresser. My dad stood at the end of the row with his hands folded, and he was the only one who couldn't meet my eyes. The photographer raised the camera. "Everybody hold." And through that lens, I finally saw the picture from the outside. Some pictures aren't for everyone, sweetheart. This one wasn't for me either. It was for them. About them. It needed me the way a lock needs a key. One turn, then done. I had spent my life auditioning for the role of daughter in a family that had already